My name is Erik Buelinckx. I'm living in Brussels, Belgium. That's Europe. And I was born in a little village not so far from Brussels called Alsenberg. So I was born in a rather standard middle-class family. I have one brother and three sisters. It's in this little village called Alsenberg, close to Brussels, in the center of Belgium. This was in a period, so I was born in 1959, so I grew up in the early 1960s. I went to school in a Catholic boys' school, so that was already maybe a special thing in the way that there were this separate education. So for me, the only girls I knew, there were my sisters and the sisters of my neighbors' friends. We were Catholic. I was baptized. We were Catholic, but not in a kind of very strict way. So it was more like a Sundays you go to church and you find a church where it doesn't take too long to have the mass. So it was more like that kind of Catholicism. The school, of course, was a Catholic boys' school. Later on, I learned also about the things that happened in Catholic boys' schools, where when I was there, we kind of laughed a little bit when there was a priest touching the boys in their pants and things like that, because we didn't know it was bad. We just laughed about it. So that was a bit a period. So we were not understanding too much what was really happening in the world. Then my father, he worked in a bank, the National Bank of Belgium. He could study until he's 17 years old, and then he had to go to work, so there was no higher education. My mother went to high school and stayed at home, so she didn't went to work, or not much, when she was older. As far as education goes, I'm the youngest of these five children, and I am the second or third one who went to university, but I was also the first one who managed to have a university degree. My elder sisters didn't finish their high school. My brother didn't finish university, and another sister went to more like another school where she became a translator, and I went to university to become an art historian. So that's a bit my background and education. It started probably in a bit a weird way, because as I said, I lived in a small village, and if I say small, it's like with 2,000 inhabitants. All my life was like with my friends, the neighbors. We went to the scouts, like the Baden-Powell thing, and yeah, it was like nothing really happened. I saw the news, things were happening, but it was we just had our little life there. But in this scouts group, when I was I think it must have been in the mid of the 70s or mid of the 70s, I was maybe 16 years old, so 68. The 60s passed, but they didn't come yet to our village. In this scouts group, there was also the national movement, and they printed a little book about what happened in the world the last decades, or even before that. It was a little book that talked about the 60s, that talked about the difference between, it was a bit philosophy-like. So you have these, you have the Greek philosophers, where you have two big different ways, like the Platonians, who are more strict, and you have then the ones who are more the Stoics, or the Cynics, who are more open and liberal in a way. So they thought about that, and it kind of triggered something in my head. And a little bit later, or maybe because of that book, I looked up in a dictionary or an encyclopedia what anarchism meant. I don't know how I came to the idea to look up what anarchism meant, but I did that. And I saw that definition, which was a very broad definition, and there was something in my head that said, that's it. That's how I feel. That's why it explains why when I was maybe maybe 10 years old, and I was punished by a priest in school. Then he hit me, and I hit back. Or when I was a bit later in school, and there was one of the teachers explaining that this means this, and I like to read a lot, and I said, no, this doesn't mean this, it means that. No, it means this, he said. I said, but no, I know that it means that. No, it means this because I say so. So this feeling I had, which was not defined, suddenly it appeared to me. So anarchism is about that. It's about this freedom of what I want to say, but also about taking responsibility. It was still very, very vague, but so I must have been 16, 17 years old, and then these ideas came to me. But of course, I was still living in this little village, and for the rest, we in the weekends, what we do is we went to this little bar in the village, and there we were all together with my friends, and some of them were studying, some of them were working, some of them were unemployed. So it was really a little group which showed how society worked. There were no fights, there were no things like that. It was just a little group where people were different and we could understand each other. And then maybe later, when I went to study, then other things came to it. Well, when I look back at I'm not going to call it a career because there were lots of weird periods in it. So at a certain time, I went to study in the big town, Brussels, and I went to study art history. And at the same time, I still wanted to stay in the little village I lived. So the academic studies at that time, it was a master's in art history. They were like 4 years. And the 3 first years, I just went to study in Brussels and went every day back at home to stay in my little village. I went out in the weekends in my little village, and I didn't really have another life than that. But I started to meet other people. I started to read other things. And the last year of these 4 years, I went to live in Brussels. And at that time, also, I got involved in little groups. There were not so it was like the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. There were still anarchists everywhere, but they were like not known, and there were very few. But we also started our little group at university, but we called it not an anarchist group, but a kind of a Dada anarchist group. So it was really there were no big actions and things like that. We just had a lot of fun amongst each other. But as I went to the university, I had lots of time, and there were no lessons. So I spent a lot of time. My time I spent in the library, and it's there that I started also to read all the books that I found about anarchism and all these kind of things. So this started build up how I felt about anarchism, and also there were some kind of demonstrations, there were special actions, and being involved in that group, there were also some. It's a completely unknown group, and we were maybe 5 or 6 people, but there were also some actions that involved like inflammable things, and there were house searches with my parents and all this kind of thing. No arrest, but still there were some complicated periods. But I want to say that this group that I was involved in was not really a group. It was just people that know each other. And through all my life, I was like never involved in an organized anarchist group. I was always more on the side of people that were active in one way or another with anarchist events. If I was involved in other groups, or was there a kind of an evolution? It's more like an evolution. So when I said before that when I was like 15 years old, and I had this, I discovered that in this rather official Scouts thing, suddenly this spirit of the 60s came through, and there was this information came about freedom, about liberation, and I evolved probably from somebody who, as a kid, was Catholic, and I believed in God or things like that. That I evolved through some to anarchism, over some like, okay, Jesus was the first socialist maybe, and then evolved further. And it was only very, very, very much later, because some time ago, I tried to do a PhD in art and anarchism, which it didn't work out because of lots of reasons. But I started to study again how evolutions went and how the history of anarchy or liberatory ideas went. And I suddenly realized when studying that there were indeed some groups considered more or less anarchist or communalism right after the first Jesus things in the Middle East. So for me, it's like always more like there was something in my gut that I was feeling. And then I read history, I read theories, I read all kinds of things. I said, oh, yeah, maybe it's that. So it's not based on some strict rational thinking. It's more a gut feeling. I have problems being involved in something. It's a character trait. It's also I often feel when I try to be more involved in something, I get a bit scared of a loss of freedom. So I have this difficulty. I can explain it with another example. I had a friend and we wanted to make a music group. And after 2 rehearsals, I said, I can't do that. I feel too much constrained by the rules that we put ourselves on to be in this little group. So it's maybe something like that. I don't know. But for the rest, I've been always in contact with people who are in groups. I've supported groups. I've been financially supporting groups also. And I kept I kept contact. To explain about... It's just a stupid anecdote. When I was at university, we were sitting with 3 other people in our little, probably squatted apartment somewhere, and with our Dadaistic anarchist group who tried to put out a kind of a magazine. And then there was a new person coming, and he wanted to be a member of our group. And he said, okay, next time when there's a manifestation, it would be very good if we all put on our boots and our helmets so that we can fight the police. And we 3 others, we were sitting there in our chairs, probably stoned a little bit, and we started laughing. So that maybe explains a little bit why I was not really too much involved in groups. I don't know, it's a good example. Can I first read a text that I found again? I knew it was in the thesis I never finished. And it really has to do with what you are doing here. You've caught me at an interesting age. When you're young, you look on the past as the enemy. All those hierarchies, all those ossified notions, all those rules, all to be defeated without discrimination, annihilated completely. When you're a little older, you tend to look on history slightly more favorably. An ally to help to reassure you for the continuing struggle. Or perhaps it's because you now have a history of your own. For me, that was when I read that like 10, 15 years ago. I said, but this explains a lot. I'm in this weird position. I'm not an official anarchist, if this exists. I'm just trying to live my life, but I have these ideas. What do I do with all that? And I also have to maybe explain that in my life, I explained that I went just to the university, but I didn't tell what happened afterwards. And so I was a bit active in the movement. There were some slight problems with the police and things like that. But there were also other things. It was the 80s, beginning of the 80s, and the world was a grim place like it is now. So I also had this... it's a personal thing to tell now. It has to do with depression. It has to do with alcoholism. And so there were lots of periods where there are holes in my past. So, and the only thing that I always come back to, apart from my partner, who is still here, back to is also, okay, but anarchism as an idea is something that maybe, if everything goes a bit better, maybe can work. And it's always a kind of a discussion in my head, so that I don't have to be naive. And the other hand, I said, no, you have to be naive because it's the only thing that maybe will save us in the future. So that's a bit the thing about how I stand on this anarchism thing. After these problems, I came back to life again, thanks to my partner and some other people. I started working. I worked as a civil servant I worked as an independent designer, desktop publisher. Then I worked as a civil servant for 20 years in a Belgian federal institution where I was responsible for the digitization of art images and things like that. And I always had to find this way, how can I combine my life as a father also of two sons with the ideas that I have in my head about what an anarchist life would be. And I must say that for me, one of the most important parts of my anarchism, I had big discussions with other people about it, it's like, okay, but we can compromise very well hopefully without losing too much of our realness. I can't remember when it was. I already had a car. So it must have been after I was, because I started to drive when I was 29 or something like that. So it was probably my early 30s or late 20s. And there was an anarchist gathering somewhere in Flanders in Belgium. It was a barbecue thing. It was also the period where meat was very important. Barbecue meat was very important for anarchists. So it's changed also on that side. Going back home to Brussels, I had some people driving with me, and one of them was, and I say this now with a bit ironically, a very old person, probably was like I am now, and we were driving home, and we started to talk about life, about things like that, and for me, suddenly as a kind of 30-year-old, discussing with a person who still has these anarchist beliefs as a 60, 70, 80 years old. This was kind of something, I hope I can keep this. I hope I can, one way or another, even if my life is not going to be completely like that, I hope I can keep these kinds of ideas. And I hope I can maybe, in one way or another, pass on these kind of ideas. And it's not the strict anarchist idea like this. It's more like this no-label anarchist general idea about people are just, to put it very, 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 very simply, it just is this very simple combination of individualism and socialism and communalism together, which for me is anarchism. So if we can pass on these ideas that it's still possible to talk to each other, to help each other, to discuss with each other without throwing bombs on each other, I think that if I can pass this on, that would for me be a kind of a success, a little way. And having been through, not actively for a lot of time, but having been through this period from the 60s to the 2020s now, and having seen all the up and down movements that anarchism, if you take this broad sense, anarchism has seen, I think it's very important that for people like me and other people, that in moments that it's complicated, that we don't forget about this anarchism, that we try to explain these things exist, these ideas exist. They are older than 19th century old men with beard. They are like as old as people started to live together. And I have to believe this also to keep a sane mind. I have to believe this, although it's sometimes complicated, especially the last year. But I had a citation many, many, many years ago, before your time, before maybe Nathan's time, I think like that, where somebody wrote, there are two environments where it's almost impossible for anarchists to work. It's the church and it's the academy, university, because these two environments are the most hierarchical environments that mankind could envision. And for me, it was very funny to read that so many years ago, because it was true. I saw this and I experienced this. And then we are now living in 2025, and I've been a member of the Anarchist Studies Network since 10 years. Suddenly I see all these people popping up and taking over a little bit even the academia. So this is also a positive thing to see. So I don't need to be this annoying, cynical person saying, "Oh, yeah, it's all hierarchy and all that." While there are people like you and Nathan and all kind of people that prove, you can even in that world you can lay all the little eggs of change.